Well, I just want to thank the organizers very much, particularly David and Stuart Schwartz, as well as the Ministry of Education and all the great the invitees for holding this last panel on public health and medicine. The goal here is to answer two questions, and we can debate about the importance of these questions after the presentations. But the first is, with respect to public health and medicine, how to effectively study Brazil as a field site. So that's a loaded question. And then the second is, what impacts and challenges are there for the exchange of this knowledge developed between American and Brazilian universities? So we have a very nice panel here of three Brazilians who are invited, two of which are professors here in the United States. And let's get started by introducing Dr. Marcelo de Oliveira Dietrich, who is an assistant professor of comparative medicine and neurosciences. Marcelo had gotten his MD and his PhD from Universidade Federal do Rio Grande do Sul, and he has now established his research group and has an academic position at Yale working in neurosciences, and particularly animal behaviors and underlying mechanisms. Okay, Marcelo.
Thank you. So thank you. Is this working? Yeah. So thank you very much for the invitation. I guess I was supposed to be the moderator of this session and then changed kind of a couple weeks ago. I believe I have very little to add to these questions, and I'm kind of sort of an outlier in the sense that I work with basic biomedical research. So showing that kind of research into this group, I think, will be a little bit boring. So I prefer to present sort of an updated version of what I present in the last meeting in May about a small but energetic initiative that I have in Brazil to foster education in basic biomedical research. So I think it is nice to be talking here after the previous session, because I think some of those concepts are important here. But I think one aspect of biomedical research is that the gap, the inequality gap, is really huge, because it's a very expensive research to perform and needs infrastructure, technology, is under exponential growth with all the computational resource and the machinery that's now needed. So it's very hard to keep up with the growth of the field in countries like Brazil if we are not investing in the science. So, but I will give a little bit of my rationale, or if you, or perhaps my dream, part of one of my life dreams here. And so the rationale is very simple. It's so basic biomedical research, and it seems that not only biomedical research is dominated by a system organized in highly hierarchical structure. So there are few people in subfields that they really dominate science. And by that, I call background, the background of some of the scientists, or the pedigree, where they come from, who are their mentors. It really creates this massive power structure of the winner takes all. So few people, they will be very well funded, they will have a lot of opportunities, and quite often they will drive scientific discoveries. Because in biomedical research, the more resources you have, more capable you are of doing discoveries. So the hypothesis that I work on this initiative is that giving opportunity to talented individuals from diverse cultural and intellectual backgrounds at very early stages of their career could perhaps promote scientific discoveries, different type of scientific discoveries, because now you are bringing different intellects to biomedical sciences by uncoupling this cycle. A famous scientist, the founder of modern neuroscience, Santiago Ramon y Cajal, he wrote a book which is called The Advice for Young Scientists, and he said that there's something very dangerous in biomedical research. That was 1889, which is to come from a very famous professor. Why is dangerous? Because you for the entire career, you are gonna have to work to sustain the theory of the mentor, because that's the power structure. In the moment that you uncouple that, you are not going to have the benefits of coming from that powerful pedigree. So basically, you're working your entire life to sustain the theory of another, not of your own self. So if you don't come from that kind of pedigree, you have one advantage: you don't have anything to defend. So you have freedom to think, but then you don't have the infrastructure or somebody to fight for you. So that's the paradox that Cajal raises at that time, 130 years ago, the importance of giving opportunity for people that don't come from these pedigrees, because perhaps there are the next really breakthroughs in scientific discovery. So I'm kind of inspired by that. What is the intervention? My observation is very simple. I played soccer seriously until I was 14. Then I broke every bone in my body trying to play a competitive soccer. And where I come from, in south of Brazil, there are two things that we are known for. Some very good soccer players, Ronaldinho, I play together with him, and top models, extremely beautiful women. And it's amazing because I grew up playing soccer in quite bad areas. I was not poor. I came from a wealthy family, but to play soccer, you have to play everywhere. Every place that I played, there was somebody watching. There was always somebody watching us, and they would come and talk to us to provide some sort of reward for the good players. You could come here, you could get this, they will contact you, they will contact your family. There were always these people watching. And the same thing happens with the top models. They will watch these 12, 13 years old girls and see which ones are the ones with the potential to be beautiful, to be a top model. I found that striking. Why can't we do that with education? Why can't we just look and see the talents, see the people that are motivated, that can have this capacity? Why can't we work in the children and in our teenagers or our young adults to give them the opportunity to be leaders? So that's my inspiration, that's my observation, and perhaps one of my career dreams. To apply the same method to identify the next generation of talented young scientists in place that are outside of the geographic map that determines current scientific research, mostly US, Europe, and in a exponential scale, China. So the goals of what I do, which is a substantial amount of my effort, but it's kind of my hobby, it's not part of my job. I want to say every time I spend an hour on this, I'm taking an hour away from actually what pays my salary, which is to get grants and deliver science. So it's a risky decision, but so my goals are to identify the most talented young scientists in basic biomedical research in Brazil, and if I could, in the world, but you have to start somewhere, and provide opportunity for them to receive competitive training, and perhaps, as the previous speaker, John Logan, said that he's starting 86, I believe, perhaps in 40 years from now, we can change a little bit the landscape of biomedical research. And to create an environment of scientific discussion and competitive science in Brazil, because I think you cannot just take people away. You have to go and create some entropy in the environment, because I think that agitates society and can create awareness. That's very important. So people can dream of that career, not only playing soccer or be a top model, but now becomes something interesting. If you are a kid, that's neat. That's a role. There are role models out there. We have to bring that information to places, and to ultimately facilitate the training of talented Brazilians abroad. I don't think that's bad. I think that's a strategic plan, because many of these people will return to the country and will bring now knowledge and these hubs of network to create this networks of excellence. So I have doing experiments with this kind of projects for probably 10 years. But when you are too young, nobody respects you. And so I'm relatively young, but a little older than I was 10 years ago. So people listen to me a little more than before. So our current, it's all basically brutal force, what I'm going to show here. It's trying different things and very little resources, a lot of my personal resources, actually. So now we have kind of a website. We want to make some sort of NGO type of thing, but I never had the energy and the funds to do it. So we call Opportunities in Biomedical Research. We say that we strive for excellence for Brazilians and Latin American students. So there are 3 components: the search for these young people, the resources that we can provide, and the education that we can provide. It's simple. Some things work, some things don't work, and then the things that don't work, we drop and we try again. So it's basically doing experiment with this kind of initiatives. In my field, scientific meetings are important, so you can network students and talented young people with PI. So we have been doing meetings for almost 10 years. The next one will be next week, and we call now Seminars in Biomedical Sciences. So usually we invite junior faculty to go to Brazil and give talks. We invite postdocs and grad students because young Brazilians, they connect better with this kind of young people. And I select kind of informally these people to go, the ones that are basically my friends, and I trust they are good people, and I trust that they want to give opportunity to whoever they believe are good. So I connect them, and many of them actually will invite these young people to join their lab, in many occasions fully funded by the host lab, so without need of scholarships or anything like that. So this year we have 150 registrations, is our record so far. We start with 20, then went to 40, 50, 90, now it's 150. Of this we have more than 120 students, so I actually don't know how to handle that many students. We will see. I present a 1-minute video that we did a few years ago about one of these meetings.
Essa segunda escola de alto estudo de neurociência é uma escola muito centrada em permitir a interação, favorecer a interação, estimular a interação entre pesquisadores internacionais e nacionais renomados e a gurizada que faz ciência no Brasil, alunos de graduação, alunos de mestrado, alunos de doutorado, as mais diversas áreas.
Eu achei assim, bem interessante quando eu vi o programa e em ter pesquisadores de outros países, a gente ter a chance de ter o contato com eles, conhecer a linha de pesquisa.
O que mais me interessou foi a programação, os palestrantes, grandes nomes da ciência e de onde eles vinham, né? De universidades super renomadas, como Oxford.
Foi algo maravilhoso, jamais imaginei que eu ia chegar tão perto de uma pessoa tão proeminente na área, uma coisa muito motivadora.
A escola.
Anyways, this is just a short video that we made to try to actually have some impact and diffuse this meeting. And so many of these scientists are now, probably more than 20, through this network, they are now pursuing full PhD in Germany, UK, postdoc in labs in the best institutions in the world. So it's quite, it's quite an effective system, if you call it that way, to give opportunities to people like that, because it works. So the resources, we have simple things, a blog with resources, because one thing that people in Brazil, they don't know the opportunities, sometimes just doesn't reach them. So it might be that there's a postdoc position somewhere that they are qualified, but they don't know about that position. So we bring those positions, those advertisements to them, and that actually facilitates a lot. We also have resources for them to learn how to apply to grad school, how to write an essay, and things like that. And grant opportunities. So many of our undergrads are now writing grants, and they spend summer in Europe, in UK, in Japan, in Australia. I think they are fully paid by different institutions, but they never heard about it. So now they can understand that those opportunities exist. And so I also, as an experiment, I thought that there were some people that they should actually have the opportunity. So if you think the analogy of a soccer team, you cannot go find somebody and send to Barcelona. You actually need to incubate these people for a little bit before they are ready. to go. So we create a lab. I call an incubator. It's the name is actually Seed Lab in Brazil, where we currently have 6 people there. So they work in science. I do meetings every week with them using Skype, Zoom. And I try basically to educate them, and so they can get opportunities to do science. Some of them want to stay, so they have the opportunity to stay there too. And I try to be basically an enzyme, a catalyzer of this process. And they are already publishing high-impact papers. That's important in our field. They are already winning competitive awards. They are applying for international grants, something that they were never doing before. They never thought they were capable of. Now they are writing their grants. They pursuing, some of them, full PhD abroad, and it's here. So basically that's kind of, it's a small impact for this, but I think for me is fulfilling. So far we have 3 undergrads that are pursuing training abroad. We have 6 grad students at Yale, 1 Oxford, 1 King's College, 2 in Lausanne, 3 postdocs at Yale, 1 at UPenn, and 1 faculty went to UPenn for a sabbatical. That's kind of the result of this initiative. We also took about 4 years of negotiation, but we also were able of signing this agreement, which we call the CAPES, Yale Doctoral Scholars Program in the Biomedical Sciences, which is a full PhD training at Yale. In this program, the goal is to bring 5 to 10 students a year to Yale in the 11 different fields of biomedical research to pursue full PhD. The interesting thing, it is a win-win situation. CAPES is only spending 1/3 of the used to spend to train a full PhD abroad. Now with this agreement, they spend 1/3, so Brazil can send 3 times more students. And with a training program that's much better than any previous training program, and it's sustainable. We select people in Brazil based on the cultural constraints of Brazil, so now they are not competing with international candidates, so we are not biasing the selection for people that are similar to the ones that are being selected from the international pool. Now we are getting people that are diverse because they are being selected against each other. And that we take in account the geography, the different cultural backgrounds, and it's a continuous program. We hope, and we hope to be of high impact. I just came back from Brazil with Tony and Valentina. There's 2 absolutely amazing faculty that have this beautiful view of diversity and value in different cultural backgrounds and knowledge. And we already select 6 students and perhaps 2 more. We are the 2 green stars are basically, they didn't fit exactly in the biomedical science program, but we think that they will fit in public health program and in the ecology. So we are trying to negotiate to see if we can give opportunity to them. The only thing that I can say, this was an absolutely astonishing experience with the 3 of us. I'm very junior, but they are very senior. Tony has interviewed more than 1,000 students, I think, because he goes to China every year in a similar program where they select 20 Chinese scholars to come to Yale, and these students were absolutely of extremely high quality. And if you look at the applications were not that good. Actually, in any international competition, they will be eliminated, but once you interview, the depth of thinking of these students was absolutely amazing. So we are extremely happy with this first class that's coming this year, summer 2019. So basically, that's it. That's what I have to say. How do we fund this? It's that's difficult, and all this we have support from here and there. It's not much. The meeting that I organized in Brazil in the beginning was basically self-funded. I fund myself, sometimes even with my private resources, because I believed in the idea. And then gradually I could get a little money here, a little money there. Now the Yale Office of International Affairs, they commit some funds for 3 years so we can run the meeting. That's really good. So we can bring Yale faculty and advertise actually our program to Brazilian students. And for the Serrapilheira Institute is a new foundation in Brazil. It was endowment of the Moreira Salles family, 300 million reais. So they have a operational budget of about 15 million reais a year. So they are interested in investing in the next generation of scientists across STEM fields in Brazil. So they are also giving a little bit of support to us. And this year they bring some of their grantees to give talks and interact. So that's kind of how we survive. Certainly these initiatives are in danger because it's all the funds from Brazil are drying out. And if you like or you know somebody that likes to help, doesn't need to be resources, can be just anybody that's interested in volunteering, contact me. And thank you, that's it.
Just to introduce the next, just to introduce the next speaker. So this is Dr. Marcia Castro, who's a professor of demography and also the chair of global health and population at the T.H. Chan School of Public Health at Harvard University. Marcia has been very important in several major initiatives, both globally and as well as in Brazil. One is she's a founding member of the Wilkinson Center for Demography and Global Health Capital Scientific Global Health Capital Scientific Advisory Board. She has actually applied geographical information systems, remote sensing, spatial statistics in her research across many different sites in Tanzania, in Ghana, and also in the Brazilian Amazon, where she works with malaria specifically. And Marcia also has had a very large impact in terms of education, leading a Harvard School of Public Health summer, I guess it's a
Winter.
January program,
Yeah.
January course, I think for almost the last 10 years, right, or 8 years?
10 years.
10 years, as part of the David Rockefeller Latin American Studies program. So, Marcia, please.
Thank you. So first of all, I want to thank the Minister of Education for the invitation to participate in this discussion about the road ahead. So I'm not going to use slides. I'm trying to be very objective in trying to answer the questions posed to the panel. And the very first thing I want to mention is when we talk about public health, it's a slightly different discussion because a lot of the work we do involves samples, biomarkers, clinical trials, experimental treatments, and there's an additional level of complication when we do that involving researchers from different countries. So I want to mention three things that go back to the question how those studies should be done effectively, and then towards the end I'm going to mention only two challenges. There are many, but I selected two. So point one is that if you really want to do public health right, you got to get out the beautiful rooms of the Ivy League. Nobody learns public health, understands public health, or does public health if you are not where the problem is, meaning in the field. And I don't think any doctoral students should be able to touch their diploma if they didn't go to the field to do their dissertation. And unfortunately, we still have some that have never been to the field and yet they get their PhD degrees. It's not just being in the field, but it's understanding the culture, because culture is going to determine perceptions of risk, is going to determine behaviors. And if you don't understand that, you may come with your own preconceptions, and that means your work most likely is going to be useless, and it can actually create harm if you end up with conclusions that don't really apply to the local culture, to the local context. In that sense, another thing that is important is you got to be humble, because you have the best science, you have the best knowledge regarding science, but the locals have the best knowledge regarding the context. So you have to listen to them, you have to learn from them. And I want to quote here the one thing that the new president of Harvard mentioned, which is we have to be quick to understand, but very slow to judge. And also connected to that first point is that, and relates to the history panel, we have to go back to history. Because in public health, the roots of a lot of the problems that we're trying to address now, they are in history. And if you don't learn that, we're going to end up doing what we do all the time in public health. We make the same mistakes over and over and over again. And in malaria, for example, that's one of the diseases I work with. You can read some papers from 55 and some from now, 2018, and they tell you the same problem. It's just a few years apart. Okay? Now, connected to this first point in being where the problem is, there is something called service learning that schools of public health should be the first ones and the ones doing it the most, because it's really putting the students and the faculty on the ground, doing work that benefits the community where they're working. I have to say Harvard is really not doing that much, or is not doing as much as it should. But there is, since last year, the School of Public Health is really starting to have a major concern on service learning. And I am very happy and very proud that this course that we run in January that Albert mentioned, it's a 3-week program, really intensive, but it's field-based. And the idea is to expose students, and it's students coming from Harvard, but also students from Brazil. It's faculty from Harvard and faculty from Brazil. It's everything mixed. It's exposing them really to the good, the bad, and the ugly on the ground in public health. And one of the outcomes of this 3-week program is to come up with ideas that addresses problems that they saw on the ground. And some of those ideas have been implemented by municipal health secretaries. So there is sort of a giving back, which is the essence of service learning. And a lot of the students from Brazil are now pursuing PhDs, MPHs, or 2-year masters abroad. And a lot of the students from Harvard went back to Brazil to do field work over the summer and wrote thesis, papers, dissertations, on topics related to Brazil, and we had new collaboration projects that started exactly because of this exposure. That's point one. Point two is, this was mentioned yesterday, it's all about how you establish partnerships. And what I would say here is that there are partnerships and there are partnerships. And in public health, a partnership really has to be a real collaboration, a two-way collaboration that has deep connected to it the issue of building capacity. So those partnerships really should be building a bridge between the Brazilian university, the American university, and through this bridge you have exchange of knowledge, you have exchange of experiences, everybody has to win, you have exchanges of students, faculty, postdocs, everything. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that with the recent Zika outbreak, we saw ugly things happening, in people trying to go to Brazil and do partnerships. But the partnerships were just give me your samples and that's the last time you're going to see me. That's not a partnership. And I think to some extent Brazil gave a really good lesson because the great bulk of the knowledge on Zika was produced locally. Brazil had the institutions, had the knowledge, had the capacity to actually do it. And I think to some extent the worst in those crazy partnerships in research, they really come in emergencies. So I'm not going to go over giving examples on Zika, although there are many. But it became very clear how the nature of this collaboration can be really ugly in those situations. The other thing is those bridges should also support institutional capacity. So new diagnosed tests or improving a new machine in a laboratory, those are things that can also be built, and it's also a way to build capacity. Okay, that's point two. The third point is the issue of translation. I cannot imagine doing any work in public health if you can't think of how to translate the results of your work into some action on the ground. There's got to be a policy implication. There's got to be something coming out of your work that can improve the lives of the people on the ground, on the communities you're working with. If you can't figure out anything, you're not doing public health. I don't know what you're doing, but you're not doing public health. That translation is absolutely crucial. And to that extent, doing those partnerships, it's always important to involve people from the government, policymakers. They own the data, they know the problems, and they're the ones to implement the solutions. If you involve them from the beginning, they also feel ownership of that knowledge that has been generated, and it's going to be much easier to try to get them to implement those solutions instead of just knocking at the door and saying, I did this great work, go ahead now and implement it. That's point 3. So let me talk about 2 challenges, and again, there are many more, but I only selected those 2. The first one is a challenge that comes mostly from the way that schools of public health and schools of medicine in the US work, which is the nature of soft money, meaning faculty really have to generate a large fraction of their salary with grants. Why is this a problem? I cannot tell you how many times I try to involve other faculty at Harvard I'm biased, I'm Brazilian, so I want to make things happen, but trying to involve other faculty at Harvard, and the first question they ask is there money to pay my salary? No. Okay, thanks, but no thanks. It happens all the time. So what I'm trying to say here is that it takes a little bit of risk-taking. Of course, it takes a little bit of passion as well. You really have to like what you're doing. It takes a little bit of commitment with Brazil. Again, I'm completely biased, 100%. But those initiatives that start without money, they're like planting a seed. And with any seed, some of them are going to give beautiful trees, some of them are going to die. But you're never going to get the beautiful tree if you don't plant the seed in the first place. So either you accept that there's some risks, and now I have tenure, but a million times people told me you shouldn't do that. And I probably would tell a junior faculty not to do it. I did it, but I guess it takes some kind of personality and tough skin. But there is an imbalance when you think about the payment system when you compare the US and Brazil. And the second problem I want to mention is related, that belongs both in Brazil and the US, and it's related to the sort of political context that we live right now in both places, which is the fact that there is a lack of trust in science. And then it becomes really complicated to navigate the news, to navigate some audience, to navigate the government in trying to convince that what you're doing is really facts and it's really good science. If you take here in the US, anybody in public health doing climate change is in big trouble. There's no money and there's no trust. I think Brazil, I hope we're wrong, but it looks like Brazil is going towards the same direction. There was supposed to be a climate conference in Brazil next year. It has been canceled. And I think the incoming president, to some extent, gives signals that he also wants to get out of the Paris Agreement. Hopefully this is not come true. But so I mentioned climate change in the US. If you think about the incoming president during the campaign, he mentioned, I'm just going to mention one, that we have problems with maternal mortality in Brazil because women have bad oral health. I don't know where he read this, but that's the kind of things that can happen, and it really makes us rethink, researchers and universities rethink how are we going to position ourselves, how we're going to position the results of the work that we do in this kind of context. Public engagement is absolutely crucial. Engaging with audiences that we're not used to. It's a very comfortable model. You do great research, you publish in a nice paper, yay, you're done. Well, I think those times are pretty much over. And engaging with tough audiences, putting yourself out there is more than ever important. So if we think about what is the road ahead, I think the road ahead looks like the roads I have to go through when I'm doing research in the Amazon. They're unpaved and pretty hard to drive, especially after the rainy season. But, with a little bit of persistence, determination, and courage, I think, I think we can do it. And those qualities, I think, are more than ever in order. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcia. And both you and Marcelo raised very important issues. We'll get back to that in the discussion. So, coming up quickly, go ahead. Yeah. It's a real pleasure. This is a very special pleasure to introduce Dr. Mitermayer Hayes, who's not only a collaborator, but actually a close friend and a compañero from many years of working together. So Dr. Mitermayer Hayes is a researcher, senior researcher at the Oswaldo Cruz Foundation. He's also an adjunct professor, full professor at the Yale School of Public Health. Mitermayer has had many leadership positions at the Oswaldo Cruz Foundation, which, as many of you know, is the research branch of the Brazilian Ministry of Health. He was a longtime director of that institute in Salvador, Brazil. He has had also leadership positions at the CNPq, and actually was one of the generations that have led to the success of biomedical research, particularly in tropical diseases, over the last 10, 20, 30 years. He was one of those cohorts that were trained in the United States in the 1980s and came back and assumed a leadership position. So, Mitermayer, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Good afternoon. Initially, I want to say thank you very much to the organizer. And also, I would like to acknowledge all my colleagues that answer my email. As you can see, I send an email to everybody, just to all my friends, my colleagues from different universities in America, and ask them to help those questions. And I will show you very quickly. The slide is... Where? Move the slide. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. So the first person that I asked to answer the question was Professor John David. That was Albert and my boss back in 1987, 88 at Harvard. And John David just mentioned that one very important thing was the course that Marcia just mentioned. But as well as he mentioned about opportunities that were created, bring scientists from Brazil, especially from my state and different states that went to the Department of Tropical Public Health. And all of them went back to Brazil, and they continued doing the research in collaboration with the colleagues at the Department of Tropical Public Health. He said also that use this collaboration. My case was really important. I think that I got muscle that helped me to build the infrastructure in my state. And today, my institution now has collaboration, I can guarantee you, with different investigators in America, Africa, Asia, and Europe. Also, I sent an email to Professor Lee Riley. And Professor Lee Riley, actually, initially, he was at Cornell when I invited him to come to Brazil. And Professor Lee Riley, when he came, we gave him a visit scholar to come to Fiocruz. And that time I asked him to organize a course. Then organized this molecular epidemiology course that was really important. Albert Coe, myself, Lee Riley, several colleagues from America. We offered this course every year. This course now we had the last time was this 17th edition. And we are planning to have the next one. And during this course, we have opportunity to train not only individuals that are in the university, but as well as the people that work at the Ministry of Health in Brazil. And during the course also we bring people from, students from America, from Europe, from Africa, and from Asia. That's really a very unique experience. And during this course, as Marcia pointed out, we had the opportunity to talk and interact with students that in the very end they come to USA, they go back and establish a new corporation. The other person was Professor Mary Wilson. She was initially at Harvard, now she's probably at San Francisco University. And what she called attention that she agreed with John, with Lee, but what she said here that she wants to highlight the extensive benefit from development of network and opportunity for ongoing collaboration. This extend much longer than a specific cause or event. She said that I would also note that the bidirectional nature of the interaction. Disease can continue through generation of students, good opportunity for work across discipline. Also, she called attention that in Brazil has a very impressive open database with health, demographic, and other data that provide valuable accessible background for research. And the diversity of ecosystem, population, and socioeconomic status provide a rich landscape for learning and research. And she called attention, my institution, but I can put all the institutions in Brazil. It's not only Fiocruz. Professor Eric Kitron said that he's agree with everybody, but he called attention to the importance that for the science of without board that allows a lot of investigators from America. They went to Brazil, like here, Professor Albert Coe and several individuals from USA. And also this allows people from Brazil to come to USA, not USA, to everywhere in the world. And that was a really good experience, and we need just to get a good evaluation and see what can be done in the future based in the evaluation that we have to have about this CSF. Professor Warren Johnson, I think this probably explains what several of the individuals mentioned here before. He said, listen, we have a collaboration, a Cornell collaboration in Bahia began in 1964. It still is going on, this collaboration. That means 54 years. For example, Professor Albert was from Harvard, but he went to Brazil when he was at Cornell University. And he stayed there for 20 years. And I will show you some work that we did together that made the difference for our country and also can be applied in different places. And again, he mentioned that, for example, the only reason that this is happening because they had support, they had fund. Commonwealth Fund 1964, 75, Rockefeller Foundation money from 74, 79, and the NIH from 79 goes to 2022. That means that's really important. No? And this collaboration involved almost 500 factors. That means a very impressive number. Professor Scott Weaver from Texas, he mentioned that he has not too many collaboration in Brazil, but he just started the collaboration with us, and the project involved Professor Albert Coe, Professor Guilherme Ribeiro, that was our former student, and actually, as he mentioned now, basically this is very important for us, not only to address the challenge that we have now with arbovirus disease, but now I think that was mentioned before, we face this arbovirus outbreak, and have this collaboration with Professor Scott Weaver was real benefit for us and actually for the people here. Since Zika is not only a problem in Brazil, but also becomes a problem here in America, as an example. Professor Ronald Blunt, he was a little bit, said, everybody said good things, but what you need to do in order to continue doing the research, where is this obstacle? He mentioned one important obstacle is the restriction placed in both directions on the flow of information and material. He said, protection is necessary, but this should be realistic, balanced against the risk. In the US, the restrictions are aimed at preventing importation of pests and infectious agents. But what these substances and agents are is not always clear. In Brazil, the restrictions are for removal and the use of knowledge and biological materials, but the restrictions are at times so broad that to significantly impede work by Brazilian scientists, even when in Brazil, without substantially protect anything. And here I did a synthesis for my colleagues in Brazil. What they sent the same question to them, and what they said in relation to the first question. Say, first, we have a population of over 200 million people, which are very diverse in culture, socioeconomic status, and health service access. Second, our country has an immense territory with different environmental and weather conditions. Such population and environmental variables produce a large diversity of health problems, some of them specific to our country, but measure of them similar to situations that can be observed globally. In addition, our scientists are very well qualified, and our research infrastructure is reasonable, good, compared to other middle-income countries. The most effective approach to effectively perform international studies in Brazil need to integrate Brazilian research and institutions, aiming to produce high-level science, improve local laboratory infrastructures, and train young research both from Brazil and outside. And in relation to the second question, he said that the most desired impact are production of outstanding scientific knowledge that can improve health, not only of Brazilians, but also of other populations. And to train people to work on health and on science globally. Some of the challenges are to maintain a true partnership that are mutually beneficial. And to supplant the bureaucratic bar for international work, which include equipment, reagent importation, biological specimen, and shipment. Here, I will now present a case of success. The case of success is really connected to Professor Albert Koh. Professor Albert Koh came to Brazil. He spent 20 years there. And he was someone that went to the hospital, went to the community. He knew everything. He knew everybody in Brazil, not only the scientists, but the people in the street knows Albert, and Albert knows the people by name. And with Albert Koh leader this project with several colleagues, actually we came with this very clear sentence in the relation to one disease that I will take as an example. For example, in Brazil, leptospirosis was traditionally considered a rural, occupational, and recreational disease. Population and environment change associated with recent climate variation led to the emergence of urban epidemiological pattern. You see this cartoon, that was very nice actually. Albert and I went to the Pau da Lima Islamic community, and we took the journalist there. The guy didn't want to go deep in the Islam, and the guy, that time you had an outbreak of dengue in Salvador, and Albert was in the hospital, and he was inside, because he was in the hospital, he came to me and said, Mitermayer, we have a problem now with leptospirosis. People die from leptospirosis. I said, Albert, okay, let's do the work. And Albert was really excited and led this process. Then we took the journalist to the field, and he came with this cartoon, very nice cartoon, because that time we tried to convince that we had not only dengue, but we had leptospirosis. A lot of individuals were dying from leptospirosis because they had a misdiagnosis of dengue. And that was very nice in English. Let's say it's combined, half of the city I will take care of, the rest is with you. That means the mosquito of dengue talk the rest. And you can see from the work that we did, for example, when Albert came to me to convince that leptospirosis was a problem in Salvador, in Brazil, I said, Albert, the number that we have is low. We had that time only 120 cases per year just in the whole Brazil, but it wasn't true. The work that we did with our colleagues demonstrate that instead of to have 120 cases per year, we had 12,000 cases. And the lethality is around 10%. And as you can see, this leptospirosis, just to fit with the sentence that observed, the leptospirosis now is a big problem in the big city. You have a rain, storm, have a lot of cases in Porto Alegre, Curitiba, São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, Belo Horizonte, Salvador, Recife, Belém. And this graphic here that was done in the first work that Albert published in Lancet, and we continue doing that in our course, showing that if after rain, if you had a rain 1 week later, if someone comes with fever, headache, muscle pain, we should think about the leptospirosis. And right now it's more challenging because you have to think about leptospirosis, dengue, chikungunya, Zika, and yellow fever that's come back. And you see here where the place that we work, in the panel, is the Pau da Lima community. You see how is the problem there. And believe, Albert knows every space in this area here. Actually, I used to live in Pau da Lima when I came to Salvador. I come from a very poor family, and I had to live in the slums. Again, based on the work that we did together, and we knew that the epidemic were associated with rainfall, attack the same Islamic community every year, was a rat-borne transmission and a single source of virus. And also, we generated this information that in Brazil have not only 120 cases per year, but 12,000 cases per year, and a case fatality going 10%. But if the individual develop a pulmonary hemorrhagic syndrome, this go over 70%. And again, because Albert was in the hospital, then he came to me, Mitermayer, the people is dying there. And we need to pressure the Secretary of State of Health. Then we pressure them. Listen, we need to take care of those individuals. Then we pressure them to put a mechanical ventilator to help the people, and also to provide hemodialysis. This make the difference. Because if you don't provide those two things, the individual will die in 2 days. But provide them, you save life. I'm almost finished, Albert. So the other very important thing from the work that we did, just straight what are in yellow, we build the information that we give back this information to the community. And the community leader in Pau da Lima, the slum, they were able to write a project and got 36 million from Brazilian US dollars to build a closed sewer system in the periphery, in that specific area. That's really something very important. Again, doing this work, we create a multidisciplinary team with several individuals that we are mentioned here. You see the people, and now we have people from America, people from UK, and people from different places work together. And I could guarantee you that we publish more than 100 papers. It's 443 papers here just for this environment now, but put it all together. And see, I forgot to say that. My old professor said that the work that Albert did there, leader with our group, that means the work that comes from the slum to the molecule. And I want to just point out that this graphic here will decrease the prevalence of leptospirosis in Salvador because from the work that are done and talk to people. And also, we are able to generate the first the RAP test for leptospirosis that now is available for the health system there. Here, now, with Albert and our group now, we are really involved in just to face this Zika epidemic. And I don't go through here, but we are doing that together, and with several colleagues. See all these young people here are involved, and for us it was a real tragedy, the Zika situation. And we have a court now following the ladies that were exposed to Zika, but following also the kids, and we received money from the NIH and some money from Brazil, from the state at federal level. And here, just to show this picture here, where you can see Albert, myself is to the top there, and you can see that we did the science, but it was a science of social inclusion, because several individuals, the community, became scientists, and some end with PhD level. That's a really important thing. And as you can see, we, basically up to now we're 330 Brazilian trained, 115 US students and fellows were involved in projects that were developed there, to face those. And here has a flow chart showing that we start, let's say, with Warren Johnson, then Lee Riley, Albert Chico, Edgar Carvalho, Albert, Peter Diggle, Ibego from United Kingdom, and also Federico, that were our student now. He's a leader of this project. That is really important. And I want to just bring this. I got from my colleague Lee Riley. The measure of success are the number of trainees who are now doing research, number of independent research grants received by former trainee, number of trainees trained by former trainee, number of former trainees now in position of influence in health and biomedical research, number of publications, number of public action initiated in Brazil as a result of this program. I could say also, not only publication, but patent also. And here are some Lee Riley, Warren Johnson, Edgar Carvalho is in the middle here. Say Dr. Edgar Carvalho over here. He's a leader from our group there. But I want just to point out the importance that Albert Eco had for us. He really was a really important person, okay? With this, I say thank you, Albert.
I can probably say that about 50% of what Mitermayer said was true. So one thing I didn't do was introduce myself. So I'm, of course, Albert Coe, and I'm a professor at the Yale School of Public Health, the Yale School of Medicine. I'm also chair of the Department of Epidemiology and Microbial Diseases at the School of Public Health, and had lived in Brazil from 1995 to 2010, really, in a very unusual situation. It was a situation where, as I was a professor at Cornell, but I was seconded to the Brazilian Ministry of Health. And that, at that time, I think was a very visionary move or investment, not only from Cornell University, but from the Oswaldo Cruz Foundation. And I'll come back to that. So I'm just going to take the liberty as the moderator, just make highlight a couple things before we get into a debate, and hopefully end my comments with some provocation so that we can get some, especially we need some provocation at the end of the day to keep us awake. So let me just say one thing, and I'm going to reinforce many of the statements made not only by Marcelo and Marcia and Mitermayer, who really showed some very good or important examples of success stories when it comes to capacity building and training. But I just want to also add that there's a really truly important value, and these were the Brazilian paradigms for public health and biomedical research and public health research that have happened since when I went to Brazil in 1995. And when we think of the advances made by really research and academicians in terms of HIV and universal access, immunization programs. We have an immunization program in Brazil, which is, one can make the point, does things that we cannot do here in the United States, like mass campaigns and vaccination, coverage rates which are much higher than the United States. We had the session yesterday on the legal, but I mean, there was a very unique Brazilian experience in terms of the legal guarantee for social rights, which includes the universal healthcare system. And I think, and I think it's quite obvious from us, from at least my own personal experiences, but I think the experiences many people in the room, is that what we can learn or have learned in Brazil is directly translatable and widely applicable to settings where they're undergoing either environmental changes, social inequity, aging populations, rapid urbanization. And so much of the things that have been learned in Brazil and will be learned in Brazil are going to be directly applicable of what is going to happen in the poorest regions or the poor regions in South Asia or Africa. And so I think that's the important part. I think the second issue is that I think the other thing, as an American who's been working in Brazil and started in 1995, has really been impressed by the aspirations of Brazilian researchers. I mean, I remember the morale of Brazilian researchers, in 1995, at the beginning of UDF, when the crippling inflation, the crippling social inequity that was happening. And you talk to Brazilian researchers now, and I think the success stories Marcia raised, an important was the Zika. That was led by Brazilian researchers. Brazilians are leading global initiatives on the social determinants of health. It has made an impact in terms of the dialogue of South-to-South translation, whether it's vaccine and vaccine development with Butantan and Biomanguinhos, or whether it's training and capacity when we think about Mozambique and Angola. And I think one of the best indications of those aspirations and the realization of those aspirations are the U.S. students. I mean, I think we've had, much of the Brazilian studies, and I think Marcia and Marcelo can attest to this, much of the excitement about Brazil is not to necessarily, well, of course it's working in the field, but it's really to learn those paradigms that are unique to Brazil. And much of those things are driven not by us or by the faculty, but have been driven by the students. Now I'm going to go to the provocation, and with all those good things that have come out, I think I'm kind of, my vision is that of the cup half empty, rather than the cup half full. We all have this sense. And I think perhaps that's why we're sitting here in the room, that we can do more with what we have, with the expertise that we have in Brazil, of course, but between Brazil and the U.S., and that we haven't been responsive to either the aspirations of Brazilian researchers, but also aspirations of our students, whether they're in Brazil, U.S. And I think many of us, and I think the earlier session had a speaker who has an expertise in China. We see the kind of negotiations and the kind of the infrastructure and the structure that's being built with our universities in China, and we kind of scratch our heads and say, why aren't we doing this in Brazil? Why are we doing the same paradigms on our that we've done 20, 30 years ago? We're not thinking out of the box. And I think we really feel, many of us, I feel sad, and I'm looking at Don Filer, in the back, but we're just kind of not building the robust programs, out of the box, exciting, innovative programs that we're seeing being done in other parts of the world. I think part of those reasons were highlighted. I'm going to bring this together, some of the talks before, but Dr. Fisher told us, a lot of this is the ambiguity, the undefined role of U.S. institutions as Brazil is growing. I think and I would put the blame, or not the blame, but to be provocative, I think the blame has to be assumed in Brazil, the lack of strategic vision. Many of these programs are one-on-one organic collaborations, but they are highly fragmented. I had a very nice conversation with Dr. Simonson Leal last night. Where should that investment be strategically? Should it be application or should it be basic? We have a very fragmented. We don't have a unified vision of that. We have. Let's see. We are losing out, especially when we think of biomedical research, and we're thinking of public health. We're losing out on really the impact of collaborative research. There was a discussion last time, but for us, it's extremely important, the issues of economy of scale and critical mass in terms, and these are issues that Marcelo raised earlier, and I can't say how important those are. And then lastly, I think, and this is what Marcia said, is we do not have the business model to make long-term sustained impacts. One thing she said was more on the U.S. side was the soft money position, but this is my own personal opinion, but I feel that we are losing traction, at least between U.S. and Brazilian, when we compare to the more robust programs, the Newton Initiative in the UK, or the initiatives by DFID, or the Welcome, or in Germany. And I think that's part of this, we've been entrenched, I think, in paradigms, and I think this is the right time to make new paradigms. I don't have the answer to what those paradigms are. I mean, I think I had a very nice discussion with Dr. Simonson Leal and what that could be. But I'm going to use that to open it up, that we have successes. But I do think that we have a sense that we're not doing what we should be doing, and that the sum is lower than the sum of what is not as what is the expression, is not as the whole is not greater than the sum of the parts. So let me stop there and open it up to questions, both from the responses or questions from the panel and the audience.
Thank you very much to all of you. Can you hear me? Yes, good. Very impressed with this panel, with the highlight of both the impacts and the challenges of doing this kind of collaborative work with Brazil. It has many parallels with my work in Argentina. And one comment / question for you is that I became increasingly disappointed with global health initiatives in the United States because they tend to take a very ethnocentric approach. When we take students down to Brazil or Argentina, we are not teaching them to learn from the community. Marcia was very clear on that. The experts are down there in the context and what works. And I'm very skeptical about top-down approaches to public health and global health. So what is your experience regarding global health initiatives from the States that now every major university has a global health program. And I see that it's not having the kind of success that we expect. And I wonder whether it is because it's always top-down, always savior complex, underlying all the programs in that.
Yeah, so I don't think it's always bad, but there are really bad examples. The course I teach in January, there are other 4 what they call field trip courses, and some of them are horrible, honestly. I think they should stop because they have very little interaction with the locals, and it has a touch of this kind of tourism that you go, oh, look, poor people, yay, which really annoys me a lot. It's like those tourism in favelas in Rio. I'm from Rio. That really knocks my socks off, and honestly. So, but there are good things happening. I think that the good experiences, well, first of all, what is global health, right? Global health is one of those sexy terms that suddenly everybody wanted a global health. And you take people from 10 different global health centers and you ask them to define, you're going to get 10 definitions, and probably none of them really should get the essence of what global health should be. We have other of those terms, right? Resilient health systems. Good Lord. I mean, you're basically talking about the same thing we've been talking for 100 years. You just give us, a catchy name. So I think there are good examples, and the best ones really are the ones that engage with the local community and give something back. If you don't give anything back, it's tourism. It's really not global health.
I cannot agree.
Yeah.
I think that's the missing.
To do the right thing, you need the right people. And not everybody leading those courses have the commitment to make it happen. We're human beings, so.
And let me just add one quick thing, because in my notes I had forgotten. Is Stuart here? Stuart Schwartz? Yes. Okay. So I think this is very much grounded in perceptions of the other, and I think that's what you're referring to in the ethnocentric part. I think there are two things, and again, a close friend of mine and classmate is Paul Farmer, and I think this is really the question about who's the hero. And I think what you're reacting to is, the Americans going down, that paradigm, Americans going down and being the hero in such a. Gladly, that paradigm is gone. I think healthfully, I think at least in the School of Public Health, and in Fiocruz.
Really.
Well, let me. At least I'm not sure about the United States side, but at least in Brazil, there's, and I think Mitermayer, very eloquently, showed the alternatives, and many programs, training programs are there. But let me go back to Stuart's part, and I think the other part is that, I agree 100% with Marcia. She's the chair of global health in population.
In January, not now.
In January, well, you will be. So, and I'm part, this is, people have drunk the Kool-Aid, right? It's, we're calling something new of what existed, for many years. It's sort of like the emperor's clothes. But I think what it really comes down to is going back, and this was, I think, the discussion, I think the first session of today, is that, we have to prepare the students, for these experiences as a part of an educational. And I think one critical one, and I'm going to say a defect here at Yale, which I believe is in many places, is that language. Okay, how are you going to interact with the local community? How are you going to, if you're going to have only short-term training experiences, and the students don't learn in Portuguese? We have a rule that all our students have to learn Portuguese, but when we go to our Spanish and Portuguese department, there are no courses that they can take. And so I think this goes back to just go back to the point that was made earlier this morning. Those programs are essential, not just for the people, the scholars in Spanish and in Portuguese, but for the medical students, for the medical doctors, for the public health officials, for the engineers, for the environmental things. And that's a lacuna that we haven't filled. And that goes back to some of the structural defects that we've talked about before. Go ahead.
So, and I think there is this imbalance of power to some extent that links to the problem you mentioned. And unfortunately, in public health, we have way too many examples of, people going to another place and ignoring everything and trying to do something that they believe is really good, right? And we don't have to go that way back, in time. Last week, big debate because a group of researchers wanted to release genetic modified mosquitoes in Burkina Faso for malaria. They never consulted the local population. People are not aware of the consequence of that. In fact, not even the researchers know what's going to be the consequence of that. It's a huge problem right now. But you have to understand the side of the government. Any money that comes, they want to take it. And this is a huge problem. So it's not just the researchers. You also have, particularly when you have this imbalance of power, when you talk about disease control, some governments will take any money, even if that money is not going to be allocated to do what needs to be done to reduce the burden.
So let me just say, part of that response or the solution is Marcelo and Marcelo's program. And, I think, please comment on this.
I just want to say that I think I don't have much experience with too many places in the world or in Brazil, but it's one of the places that I have been or interact with people that has the highest level of lack of vision. That's Brazilian universities and Brazilian leaders. Most of them just lack a vision. They are there for 2 years or 4 years to build some power structure, some empire, and they believe that that's interesting, and it's so sad. And it's also, I think, combined with tremendous incompetence of political leaders and many people that are in power positions. They are just not prepared for leadership positions, or they don't have management skills. And I believe, at least in my field, in this micro world that I live in, my very small experience, it's very hard. You try over and over until somebody that has a little bit of a vision is in there. And then you have to stick to that, and then you make something, and you make a move, and that move needs to be something that the next ones that will come cannot just take it away. Because if they do it, it's going to be ugly for them. So I think this lack of vision, it's what dominates this. We don't have investments. The investments are scattered. When they happen, they are in one initiative that's not sustained. So that also so I believe that's a big problem with the way Brazil is organized as a country and as a political entity. It's just my vision of it.
Yes, thank you. Thanks so much for great talks. It's a question for Dr. Dietrich. Your idea of incubator is fascinating, I find, and I like your analogy with soccer football team. I think it's very apropos. Could you walk us through what you are doing as far as the incubator is concerned, the lab, if any, and given your limited resources, how are you managing, and what outcomes have you arrived at so far?
Yeah, these are very relatively small initiatives compared to what they have shown here. But, I'm talking about what happens there, not people that we find there, we incubate, and now they get training elsewhere. We have like a postdoc there, an undergrad there that came from kind of that incubator. But the kind of research that I do is sort of expensive. But if you are creative, you can be cheap. So I recognize that one cheap thing is computer. You buy a $10,000 computer that lasts forever. And so that's one component of it. We bought computers. We train people in bioinformatics, computer science, and it's a small group. But one of those students is now here, so she can get a better environment to grow, perhaps go back or not. But then it's easier to train abroad, virtually, computer scientists. And then in the hospital there, they have very good infrastructure. It's actually quite equivalent in terms of, I do animal work, equivalent to the animal work that we do here at Yale. But one of the problems with Yale is that it's virtually impossible to use some animal models, just too expensive. It's I cannot afford, for example, because it's outrageous. There's no actual clear calculation of costs. It's just this soft money type of thing that we have to pay ourselves, but they also overcharge animals without clear indication where the charge comes from. So, for example, I collaborate with China. They are doing all these CRISPR animals. I do CRISPR pigs in China. We cannot bring pigs to the United States. We do CRISPR. They are doing CRISPR guinea pigs in China. I cannot bring to the United States. They are doing CRISPR rats for us. They already did 40-some rats we cannot bring to the United States because I cannot afford the cost, and there is no infrastructure to generate that money. I send them to Brazil. So I have made agreements with Brazil. All these animals are going to Brazil. I have a postdoc. She graduated in Oxford. She's actually going to Brazil for 6 months experience because now we have surgeons that can do interventions in animals that actually the best labs in the United States cannot do properly, but they can do it because they have the technical skills and the motivation, so they train these people. And so we have this in a micro level. There are opportunities that are not that expensive. It's just too much work and with a lack of, I think Albert say it's a fragmented experience. It's not at the institutional level. There is no support. So it's kind of, sometimes I feel like you are battling against an army and you are just the only one. So that's kind of difficult, but it's possible. My goal is just to serve as an example. And perhaps one day that example can be disseminated, perhaps in initiatives like Yale has campuses in Asia. Why not having a campus in Brazil? Why not having all this talent from Latin America? And so I think that you have to bring the example perhaps sometime. One day somebody will see that, and then we can expand that initiative.
I'd just like to add 2 points to what Marcelo said. One point is the how to say it, much of this, I think, is not an issue of at the personal level. This is a structural issue. Many of these are structural issues. And this goes back to the comment, I think, made by Dane Borges about the difficulty in many, depending on the field, of intermediate structures, in the empowerment or, in that capacity building that really needs to be done. And I'm just reflecting on that. I think the second point is that, we really haven't, with Brazil, we haven't thought out of the box. You have done it, Marcelo. We have done it to some degree, but we have joint professors, right? We have professors who are both professors in the Brazilian university as well as the United States. But we don't really have a robust, business model or, finance, such as they have in China, where professors are truly co-financed that belong to both ones. And I think that's something we're going to have to, if we really want to make, to integrate we're going to have to build those types of business models. And I'm not sure how we're going to do that, and who would support that. But,
Oh, I have ideas.
Any other questions? Go, please.
What is happening to the incidence of chronic disease in Brazil, over the last, let's say, few decades, and along with it, the ratio of healthcare costs to GDP, again, over the last decade or two? The reason why I ask is I've heard a theory that all these things have become a problem because of the exponential growth of some of these farm chemicals, which are really becoming a huge problem, in the opinion of some people.
So Brazil has a universal health system, and they have a special program for primary care that has really good coverage and has made a huge difference in reducing avoidable hospitalizations, reducing mortality. And they also created a special drug program that provides medicines free of charge, particularly for asthma, diabetes, hypertension. So it's actually not getting worse yet. That's the key word, because this program that provides drugs has been largely reduced. The program for primary care suffered a major cut in coverage because Cuban doctors who were helping to expand the coverage to areas where Brazilians don't want to go are now leaving the country. And when you harm primary care, then you're going to have an impact in those diseases. And if people cannot have access to primary care and to the drugs, then it's not going to be as immediate as infectious diseases. Those are chronic diseases, but most likely, if nothing changes, it's going to get worse. But for now, for the past 10 years, not bad at all.
Mitermayer, would you like to comment?
In some way, I think that the chronic diseases are increased also. In some way, are increased. And this consequence of the demographic transition. And also because you are improving the life expectancy. I think that just all the scientists are now we are a little bit worried because we have a situation that increase a little bit the chronic disease, but in the big cities we are increasing the infectious diseases, and since we have also violence together, this will be a big challenge for us in the future. But I agree with Marcia. The program. The SUS, the Unified System of the Health of Brazil, did a very good work, and I hope that it can continue with that, because this, I'm sure that help not the problem to grow exponentially.
Let me just say that I think Mitermayer raises an important point. The costs are going to explode because of the aging. Brazil is rapidly aging. And so, there is a threat, and that is a major issue. And there's been major policy positions done in the last 5 years, because in the next 20 years, I think the population above 60 years of age will triple.
Yeah, that's a reflection of the age structure, but if you look at the rates per se.
Sure, of course. No, that's good. And I think most of us would think that it's probably not the environmental exposure to pesticides that are causing this increase in chronic diseases, but it's this demographic, it's this epidemiological transition that's happening. I think that's fair to say. Any other questions or comments that people would like to make? Okay. Let me just ask the panel one thing. So what's the road ahead? What should we do? What do we need to do? I mean, what do we, just very objectively, what needs to be built or done after we leave this meeting today?
In my opinion, to be very pragmatic. In my case, I think that we have a lot of challenge. I think that, for example, the problem of megacities. That's a topic. We should define priorities. One is probably to address the question of megacities. The second one is probably, if you have to be very specific, is drug resistance, antibiotic drug resistance. And the other one is cancer. Since I mentioned that we have a very important, let's say, age transition in cancer now became really a big problem. And especially the cancer connected to infectious diseases, the cancer connected to virus and bacteria, stuff like that. To be very specific.
And so we have a new administration entering January 1st or 21st? January 1st. January 1st. We have a new administration, Marcia, based on what would you want to tell them to do, and what should be done in order to both from the research and academic but public health perspective?
So you're talking about topics, or you're talking about the road ahead? Because topics.
Road ahead.
Okay, so as I mentioned before, I mean the road is going to be bumpy, but I think what we need to get people that are determined, that are persistent, that have passion. Passion is absolutely crucial. You wouldn't be doing this if you're not passionate about what you're doing. And people that are really willing to put their faces out there and be slapped sometimes, dealing with tough audiences, the government being the first one. So I guess it's going to be really a rough road, but we have to be prepared, have a tough stomach and deal with the problem, putting the best science we can and doing the best public engagement we can. it ain't easy, and we're not used to do it, but we're going to have to learn it the hard way.
Just one quick thing is that it's not that easy to teach passion, right? It's it's not like you're going to go to.
But it's possible to teach people to find their own passion.
You're not going to go to a football field, and there are not a lot of football fields of scientists or and public health people. But Marcelo, please.
So everyone has a passion. Might not be the same passion that we have, but if we help them to find their own, they can make their contribution. If their passion is just some bad thing for society, then we have to take care of it. But I think the road ahead in my little world, I think the first thing, there are good examples. So I think if I was somebody that science prevails, so I would map what's going on, generate data. What are the good examples? What are the bad examples? Exactly. Learn from them and invest on them and try, without taking risks, nothing happens. And I think my other thing is, if you want to build excellence in my field, biomedical research in Brazil, you need investment. Okay, you cannot invest. The universities, I mentioned before, they have this bureaucratic and empowdered system. Then it's nice. You cannot apply the same system that you do with Asia. You cannot create a campus there because it's not going to happen. Or if it happens, it might be destroyed in 5 years. So that's good because we have to be creative. We have to generate a new system, and that system can be applied. I was mentioned to people from the ministry yesterday. I sincerely believe in one system. In when the investigator becomes a commodity. I use the word commodity. So American universities, they have that possibility. So if you create a system and now a scientist comes to Brazil, but he or she comes with their own package and they can pick whatever they are going to work, and they have a network of support from an American university, for example. Let's say a Yale Brazilian scholar that goes there for a 6-year position that's renewable for another 6 years. So this money, now I go with my package and say, hey, USP, are you going to give me the infrastructure? No? Okay, I go somewhere else. So now I'm a commodity. Now the university needs to adapt. So you use innovation to make the system stop being bureaucratic and be more efficient. So we can, but would that work? Who knows? But if you don't try, and it's not that expensive for the government, the budget that we're talking about, it's a few $1 million. That's nothing. And it's Brazil is a rich country, so they can make those risky moves. But you need people that are interested in thinking about the future. They have a vision. Without vision, nothing happens. So I think debating about those things will be helpful. And I think the American university, they can contribute so much. They are contributing in Asia. They can do in Brazil, in Latin America, but they might have to use a slightly different strategy because it's not going to be something that's going to work there because the lack of vision.
And let me just end with, I think, a very important thing that you said in the beginning is that, this goes back, I think it's gone through we don't really look back, Marcia said this, we don't look back at history. And, why don't we apply the quantitative methods that we use in our research, why don't we apply it to implementation of successful academic or programs? And I think, Marcelo, you said that. Let's get some information. Let's look at the lessons learned. But I think we should do that quantitative. So if there is a recommendation I would have to CAPES or Ministério da Educação is that, do that analysis. Because a lot of our experiences that we heard today, these are anecdotal experiences, but I think we need to have better data to go for it. So with that, I think we are 3 minutes over time. Thank you very much, everybody, for this panel.